But yes, you know, Anafenza is definitely a prize on any reasonable hand because Casey struggles to answer it so much in game one.
Right, so say he sees something like 5 lands, Anafenza, Wingmate Rock. That's a hand that's pretty weak in the dark, but Caleb could theoretically keep that here.
Yeah, and that's harder to do if Casey said has a couple copies of Murderous Cut in the deck, and there's no guarantee that the Anafenza is good game number one.
All right, we'll see here. Scherer on the left, number 12 on the leaderboard. He was one of the players just trying to sneak into the Players' Championship. Almost was able to do it on the points, but Joe Lissette not winning the tournament means that he'll have to do it the hard way. As you said, he'll need a trophy this weekend. On the right, Casey Pordes, a relative unknown here, but he is the 2 seed overall, so he will be on the play as we start game 1 here of our first semifinal from the SCG Invitational.
Remember, Pordes unblemished in standard thus far. 8-0, perfect through the Swiss rounds, and won his quarterfinal match as well.
Yeah, and we did see that actually on Friday when we started the Invitational. 4-color rally just seemed to be in every matchup at the top tables.
Well, I think if you are looking to beat mid-range decks, it's the best option. My opinion, you know, I think the mid-range 4-color, Jeskai Black, Mardu, Blue, whatever type of decks, those mirror matches are so grueling. And I don't know if you're necessarily exploiting much of a metagame inefficiency at this point. The decks that I would be looking to play in a tournament right now, Atarka Red, Esper Control of some sort, and 4-color Rally. Those to me are the most attractive decks.
Well, the first play from Casey will be a Jace Vryn's Prodigy. Now, fortunately, he was able to do it off a pair of basics, an island and a swamp, which means the battle lands for the rest of the game will be coming into play untapped.
That's important for this deck, too, because the mana is not the best. It's a 4-color deck. The splash card is double white. So the mana coming into play clean is very helpful for efficiency down the road.
For Caleb, he will have a 2-drop as well. It's a copy of Snapping Gnarlid. Now, this is something we don't always see in Obs on Aggro, but it's something we definitely see in Scherer's list. He has a full 4 copies of Snapping Gnarlid in the main. He's definitely lower to the ground than some Obs on Aggro decks you've seen. No Heir of the Wilds. He's gone for the landfall common from Battle for Zendikar instead.
Very helpful. Given how controlling the bracket looks, I think Scherer is much happier with Snapping Gnarlid, just providing a better clock than the Death Touch that he could have gotten with Heir of the Wilds.
Well, over on Casey's side, he starts to fill up the graveyard. The play was a Zulaport Cutthroat, followed by Sidisi's Faithful, just to unsummon the Snapping Gnarlid. So Caleb will take a drain damage off the Cutthroat. Board is clear. Casey now on 3 of 4 colors as well, as Prairie Stream was the play.
The leftovers here in Pordes' hand, not great. Looks like 2 lands and a Nantuko Husk. Just has a habit of cleaning that up, but there's no big payoff card here. Most notably, Collected Company, which is one of the easiest ways to break the game open for this deck in the mid-game.
Right, so if Jace could flip here, then Casey would have a good chance to maybe resupply his hand. But we did see, and this is something we talked about before the game, one of the big trumps coming on Caleb's side. He does have the important card in this matchup. That's Anafenza the Foremost, and she's ready on turn 3.
And Pordes already down 1 copy of Sidisi's Faithful, which was used on the previous turn. So not a whole lot of ways remaining to get this card off the table.
Casey looted in response. That was his last chance to get a creature into the graveyard. Anafenza will stop all the other ones. He did loot away a fetch land. Picked up a copy of Elvish Visionary, so more creatures in play. But remember, now the Zulaport Cutthroat also won't trigger when Anafenza's on the board.
Yeah, this mucks up all sorts of shenanigans in the deck. Grim Horror Specs, which is such a valuable tool in the mid-range matchups, that doesn't work right now.
Yeah, Horror Specs doesn't work. Cutthroat can still work on token creatures, but that's actually about it. There are Catacomb Sifter, you know, maybe some Scions.
The short of it is a lot of the synergies of this deck are broken up right now, and game 1 at least, it's a big struggle for Pordes to get this card off the table and do something relevant in the same turn.
All right, so if he can't combo kill Caleb, how does Casey win the game?
He's just got to brawl and Collected Company for value, but it's very hard for this deck to brawl straight up with Abzan when it doesn't have access to its graveyard.
Yeah, I mean, Anafenza the Foremost, a great creature for brawling. And how about this one? Caleb on his turn picks up a copy of Siege Rhino.
Yes. Anafenza and Siege Rhino and removal spells versus Nantuko Husk and creatures worse in combat than Nantuko Husk is a pretty good spot for the Abzan deck to be in.
Yeah, Husk was the play for Casey Pordes. It's one of his best brawlers, but as you mentioned, you know, brawling with Abzan's so difficult. On Caleb's side, an attack will come through from Anafenza. Casey will block with Jace. 4 cards in his graveyard means he will be able to flip it before it dies.
Yeah, no reason for Scherer to take any actions here. It's pretty much just a free chump block. He can kill this in response if he wants to prevent the Planeswalker from flipping, but I don't know if I would do this at the expense of the entire turn, just because there's nothing really in the graveyard to do anything with.
Well, it looks like Casey has blocked and eluded, but Caleb is going to hold that loot trigger on the stack, so maybe he's valuable enough to go for the kill spell. Now, the flashback ability on Jace, the only removal cards that we're looking at 4 Rally the Ancestor and 4 Collected Company. Rally's not going to be very good with Anafenza in play, so it's really just Collected Company.
Yeah.
Yeah, big respect from Caleb. He will murderous cut the Jace with that loot trigger on the stack. So Jace will hit the graveyard, but by that we mean he'll be exiled thanks to Anafenza. Casey resolves the loot, discards another land. Now he did pick up a copy of Sidisi's Faithful there.
I would have preferred, I think, to just play Siege Rhino that turn if I'm in Scherer's spot. The logic here may be Pordes cannot get out of this spot game 1 unless he really starts doing some crazy stuff with Collected Company, and I want to cut off his route to flash that back and cast as many times as possible. If Pordes has to just beat me straight up with his draw step and the creatures that he puts onto the battlefield, he's not going to be able to hang with my deck.
Yeah, if that's the thinking, Jace is a tool you need to get rid of. Now, Caleb did have a follow-up after a Murderous Cut. It was the Snapping Gnarl that was bounced on turn 2. So a pair of creatures on Scherer's side of the board. Life totals, though, still both very high. Scherer at 16, Casey at 19. So you see Casey adds a Catacomb Sifter to his side of the table. Sifter, and that Sidisi's Faithful he drew last turn. Looks like it will be used right away. Sacrifice the Scion. That will drain Caleb for 1, even through Anafenza. And it looks like he'll be unsummoning Anafenza this turn, maybe hoping that Nantuko Husk could get some damage in.
Yeah, this play to me only makes sense if Pordes' plan here is, I'm not going to try to do much with my graveyard this game. I'm just trying to race, and he wants to set Scherer behind and get an opportunity to hit with the creatures he has in play.
Sure. And he will swing with Nantuko Husk. So Caleb could take damage or block with, chump with the Snapping Gnarlid. We'll see just what's happening here.
And this is Pordes' window. If he wants to have his graveyard be functional at all this game, he needs to take the opportunity now, even erring on the side of being a little bit aggressive about it, to sacrifice stuff for value and get things in the graveyard, so in the event that he finds Rally, there's something to do with it.
So how the turn played out was Nantuko Husk wasn't blocked, so Casey decided to deal 4 damage. He sacrificed that Sidisi's Faithful to put Caleb down to 10. Remember, he got a death trigger off Zulaport Cutthroat. Scry-wise, off Catacomb Sifter, he kept the top card on his deck. So he has Caleb half dead. He has a card he likes on top. Maybe he can get across for this 10?
Well, if he has a Rally on top of the deck, he gets back multiple unsummons. And with the board that he has, that could be good enough. You get the Anafenza off the table. You start sacrificing for his value. You got some Zulaport Cutthroat triggers, and the Nantuko Husk is worth a lot of damage.
Yeah, you know, you're absolutely right. There was that Sidisi's Faithful from early in the game, and that turn, because he sacked the Faithful after Anafenza was gone, it did hit the graveyard. So there aren't many creatures in the graveyard, but they exist, and this is exactly what you mentioned. He's going to go for Rally the Ancestors for 1. The 2 cards it can get are both copies of Sidisi's Faithful. So here we go.
And if Scherer doesn't have a removal spell, this very well, if not a kill, could be very close to it.
So first, Sidisi's Faithful will unsummon Anafenza. It will be exiled. Second one will sacrifice itself to unsummon Snapping Gnarlid. Now this one drains for 1, so Caleb's down to 9. And you're right, this might be this is very close to lethal. It is on, I believe it is just a tad short this turn.
Well, attacking, if you sacrifice the Catacomb Sifter, that's essentially 3 damage because the Husk gets +2 and the Cutthroat triggers. And then you can sacrifice the Cutthroat, and that's +1 because sacrificing the Cutthroat is worth 1 more point than having it deal combat damage. And so there's 5 on the table.
3 from each sacrifice. So I'm seeing 8, is that right?
Yeah, he's a little bit short. He does not quite have the kill here.
So here's a swing. It's 5 power worth of creatures. Looks like there will be no sacrifices, so he puts Caleb down to 4.
But he has definitely put Scherer in a spot where the next copy of Rally, if the board looks anything like that, is going to be lethal.
And you see Caleb 7 cards in hand, has nearly any tool you could think of. He has that Anafenza that's been bounced many times. He does have a copy of Siege Rhino if he wants to gain life points. He can't do both.
And I think the murderous cut into snapping Gnarled Turn in lieu of the Siege Rhino is tripping Scherer up a little bit here. He could really use a cheap removal spell because the Nantuko Husk represents so much pressure, and he would be up a Siege Rhino trigger for his trouble, and it would make using Sidisi's Faithful a lot more complicated because the Rhinos would be coming back down into play.
You're right. If we had a Murderous Cut for the Nantuko Husk, I would feel a lot safer in Caleb's seat.
Yep.
As it is, Caleb has to spend his whole turn recasting the 2 creatures that were unsummoned, and he passes. Back to Pordes. Pordes had an opportunity there to sacrifice creatures before Anafenza was down. He did not take it. Here's an Elvish Visionary. He draws a card, and I think he has a 3rd Faithful.
Yeah, that's just game.
And a 3rd Sidisi's Faithful will bounce Anafenza. That'll be swing for lethal, and it is Casey Pordes getting game 1 through Anafenza into Murderous Cut. You know, I did not expect that.
Yeah, that game, I've used this term a couple times in the top 8, mostly describing Joe Lissette's game. That's got to be disheartening because there was nothing wrong with Scherer's draw. It was a little bit on the slow side maybe, but he had his best game 1 spell in Anafenza. He had other stuff to be doing and a Murderous Cut to back it up, and Pordes worked his way around it pretty easily.
And you know, we're starting to see glimpses maybe of just why this player is 9-0 with 4-color Rally.
You would think if you're sure, if I draw Anafenza game 1 and have other stuff going on, I'm going to get that one.
Gnarled into Anafenza with Murderous Cut and Siege Rhino on curve. This is great.
And it was not enough.
All right, well, players are going to look at the sideboard here. Now, remember, a best of 5 means that the board plan matters immensely. Players will spend most of their time in sideboarded games. And if you're a Caleb Scherer fan, I think it's going to hurt that he didn't get game 1 because when you look at Casey Portes' sideboard, it is bold in how many cards he has for this matchup.
All right. On Scherer's side, you see 4 Pitless Horde, 3 Duress, 2 Painful Truths, 2 Self-Inflicted Wound, 2 Planar Outburst, 2 Rising Miasma. I'm not sure I would bring in any of these cards. It does look like Scherer sideboarding, at least to keep up appearances, but none of these cards strike me as cards that I would clearly want to bring into the matchup.
Yeah, so, okay, I had a chance actually yesterday. Caleb Scherer was testing with some players, and I actually got to talk with him about some matchups. So at the time, they were looking at his top 8 matchup. And I said, okay, well, you have this sideboard. How's it been going for you? He said, you know, haven't really liked the sideboard. It was handed to me. There's some cards I wouldn't work on. And then I talked to him about this 4 Pitless Horde, because we don't see that card very often. And he said, you know, I think it's good against control decks where I can dash it, and I actually like it. He said, I think it's reasonable against Rally, just as a fast clock. Large creatures that are cheap, even with drawbacks, can help him win the game.
I would not be surprised if Pitless Horde was better than Gideon. Gideon is extremely slow in the matchup, and turning into a 5/5 is not worth a whole lot because this deck is so good at chump blocking. So Pitless Horde could be an upgrade over something like Gideon, I suppose, but not going to be a superstar in any case, and sure, sideboard definitely feels light.
Yeah, the other card I want to look at before we go to Pordes' side is a card like Rising Miasma. This is a card that gives all creatures -2/-2. So we looked at the Horde here, and that's the first one we might talk about. Now, a sweeper against a deck with lots of 1/1s seems possible.
It's okay, but this is not an Atarka red deck that's going to lose when its board gets wiped. And this deck with 3 toughness, with Nantuko Husk, with Jace Fringe Prodigy flipping, it has some pretty natural protection against this kind of card. So maybe it comes in, but it's also not something I would be stoked about bringing in. At 3 mana, maybe you can talk me into it if it's Drown in Sorrow, but at 4, much more challenging.
All right, on Pordes' side, now we're going to go to, we talked about how there were no kill spells for Anafenza in the main deck. Caleb gets no such comfort post-board.
4 Murderous Cuts and 2 Merciless Executioners. Big upgrades here for Pordes. Get some answers to Anafenza. The 4 cuts here are great, and Merciless Executioner is going to get the job done here as well. You can make an argument for the 2 copies of the spell, but I honestly think the battle here is not over the instants in Caleb's deck because they're mostly just spot removal spells, but rather the creatures.
Yeah, I mean, those cards are great. We see those 2 out of the sideboard in this matchup, but 4 cut and Merciless 2 Executioner, those numbers are both on the larger side, I think, for the deck.
Yes, and an excellent sideboard for this matchup, which also should already be pretty positive for Pordes after winning game 1 through the game where he can't kill Anafenza.
How do you feel about the card Obzon Ascendancy? That's the last one I'm looking at here. If Caleb is going to try to maybe Rising Miasma, remember, Casey knows about this, is he interested in this kind of enchantment?
Maybe. I mean, it's definitely a reasonable response to Rising Miasma if he cares about it.
Players are getting ready for game 2. We're going to take a second to tell you about the fall creature collection. These are the creatures you have known and loved from SCG Game Night throughout the fall. You see we have October, November, December. That's the hippo, the otter, and of course for December we have the reindeer. They're not just on tokens and pins anymore. You can now get them on playmats, as well as our most recent parody art. That is the Penguillion Click. You get all of these on playmat sleeves and bundles. Find out more about them at starcitygames.com/creature collection. So game 1 in the books. That one went over to Casey Pordes. He's the 2 seed, hasn't lost yet with Rally. Caleb will be on the play for game 2. Now that last draw, a 2-drop into Anafenza seems great for Caleb. Can he hope for more?
Not really. And the problem is, not only can he not really hope for much more than that, that wasn't good enough. And the trump of that hand, the supposed trump in Anafenza, wasn't good enough either. And you saw the route that Casey can take to work around Anafenza, which is get off the table with Sidici's Faithful, take that opportunity to fill up the graveyard. So when the rally happens, there's some juice there. And the Sidici's Faithful, through the rally, set back, sure, several turns there.
You know, that's what was really surprising to me, because when I look at Faithful as an answer to Anafenza, yeah, it gets it off the board for a turn, but the problem is that it's not... Getting Anafenza off the board for 1 turn is not always good enough for Rally. They're a deck that, you know, chump blocks and slowly builds its graveyard up for a Rally. So today's Sidici's Faithful didn't seem like an answer. But what I was surprised by is that what Pordes did is he didn't use it to help build it up his graveyard. He used Sidici's Faithful to kind of augment a beatdown plan.
Yep, and with Scherer kind of not being able to get to 2-spell a turn territory, which is very important for Abzan, those unsummons swallowed up his whole turn. And because he was on Anafenza and Snapping Gnarlid, he wasn't getting any enters the battlefield triggers for his trouble as well while that was happening.
Yeah, so an interesting game to say the least. As we're getting ready for game 2 here, both players have mulliganed to 6. It looks like Caleb has kept on 6. Casey will be going to 5.
And this rally deck, I think more than any other deck in Standard, when it goes to 6 cards, is likely to go to 5 more than any other deck, because the colored mana situation.
Okay.
There's a colored mana issue with the deck, and you just have these pieces that don't really do very much on their own. There are a fair amount of value, I suppose, in the deck, but Zolpor, Cutthroat, Sidici's Faithful, Nantuko, these are cards that are sort of predicated on other stuff going on for them to be functional Magic cards.
You do kind of need 3 creatures before they start doing powerful things. So I imagine if you're looking at hands, you know, which is just a Faithful, a Cutthroat, and some lands, that, you know, this isn't even good for a draft deck.
Right. This is a hand that can dead end pretty easily.
So it looks like he has kept on 5 and has scryed to the top. So Casey has found something he likes as we begin the match. Remember, Caleb on 6, Casey on 5, so same number of cards for both players. They'll trade lands to start the game, but looks like we'll see first action once again from Scherer on 2. May once again be the Snapping Gnarlid. I believe he's kept them in.
I would definitely want them on the play. On the draw, it starts becoming questionable because Pordes can start locking up the ground in a pretty strong way by the time the 3rd turn rolls around. But on the play, give me as much aggression as possible.
Yeah, it is hard for Abzan to attack on the ground. Generally, the kind of ways we try to see them win are cards like Den Protector, actually, to attack through the line, or Wingmate Rock. You see here a turn 2 Den Protector played as a 2-1 for Caleb.
And we've seen that play a lot through the top 8 thus far, now in the top 4. People in these kind of matchups really evaluating just getting on the board. I remember watching Abzan and Aggro months ago where it felt like Den Protector was always face down, but some of these matchups are extreme enough now where you just got to get something onto the table.
Well, when you look at the creatures from Rally, we have things like Zulaport, Cutthroat, Elvish Visionary, and now, as we see from Pordes, Jace Vryn's Prodigy. There actually are a fair amount of creatures that just can't block Den Protector.
Yeah, but it's more of an issue of Caleb feeling like he just needs to get on the offensive rather than if this card is particularly evasive. Though you're right, it is not the easiest card for them to block.
Well, on the offensive we will go then. Den Protector swings in and puts Pordes down to 17. Caleb rears up for a follow-up play. You know, you gotta, I think you're always hoping that it's Anafenza. Does look like on Caleb's side he has brought in at least 1 copy, if not more, of Duress for the matchup.
Only 8 spells, but those spells sure do matter.
He decides. And this is the sideboard card we talked about. Caleb said it was in his deck for this matchup. Pitless Horde. A 5/3 for 3. Yes, Caleb will lose 2 life each turn, but this creature is very large.
Sums it up. That's a lot of numbers for 3 mana.
Yeah. Hits harder than an Anafenza. And that's hard to do.
And with Pordes on 5 cards, pretty good chance his hand's a little disconnected, needs some time to develop. And Scherer, especially following this up off the heels of a turn 2 Den Protector, is not giving Pordes a whole lot of time.
Well, yeah, there just don't seem to be many ways for Pordes' deck to be able to block this. I suppose his cleanest answer is Catacomb Sifter. Both creatures together could take down a Pitless Horde.
Grim Horror Specs is a reasonable answer. And you have the Merciless Executioners and Murderous Cuts in the sideboard.
Okay, so there are ways, but I suppose maybe he can answer it, but it's very punishing if he doesn't.
He is not flushed with 3 power.
Yeah.
That is definitely true. Most of his creatures are 1 or 2 power, and trading at parity with that card is not easy.
All right, so this was an interesting line, which I kind of wanted to ask you about. This turn, Casey looted. He looted away an Antuco Husk and then didn't play anything on the turn.
Well, he may not have access to black mana. Keep in mind, Windswept Heath cannot get you to black mana. And he's on Forest and Prairie Stream, so his hand might, there's nothing to cast that turn.
That much makes sense. So Caleb, though, maybe doesn't have anything to cast on his side either, but he has a lot of damage to serve. 7 in from Den Protector and Pitless Horde. He has Pordes down to 10. And now we will fire off a Duress. We'll see just what Pordes is working with. It was a 5-card hand, remember. And here's the grip. Murderous Cut, Catacomb Sifter, Flooded Strand, and Rally the Ancestors. Those are the 4 for Pordes.
I'm guessing we're going to see Murderous Cut hit it here.
Yeah, I mean, if your plan is to Pitless Horde someone, I would hate to see my opponent get that card off the board.
And it looks like Scherer has an opportunity this turn to follow up with another Den Protector, and may just be able to shove Pordes out of this game before he gets anything going.
Cut is taken. Now with that Flooded Strand, Casey can make the Catacomb Sifter next turn. But you're absolutely right. There's no 4th land for Caleb, so he'll play another face-up Den Protector. Looking a lot like just a Wandering Wolf in the top 8, but that was a good card too.
Sure. Wandering Wolves, Zuzam Dijins, no removal, barely any interaction here, just a Duress. But if your opponent's going to be messing around with, 1/1s for 2 mana and so forth, it's not the worst strategy. Casey going to fetch up a basic Plains. That will get him into double basic territory so that he can use Battlelands to find his colors. Draw for the turn was a Polluted Delta, so mana now online for Pordes, but he is at 9 life. Facing against an opponent with all spells in hand is sure missed a land drop last turn.
Oh, you're right. That has got to be concerning if you're Pordes. Now, Jace could flip this turn, which means that flashing back Murderous Cut is on the table.
The issue is that Pordes only has 1 black mana to work with. So he can't go Murderous Cut and Catacomb Sifter, let's say.
Right, and he'd love to make that play. So maybe what we could see then is we could see that block and loot trick that he did last game where he uses it to prevent damage for a turn.
Yep. He can cast the Catacomb Sifter.
Right.
And he can effectively chump block the Pitiless Horde with the Jace for free.
That makes sense. Now, Catacomb Sifter is pretty good against Den Protector.
Right. So, you can at least stabilize the board for the time being that way. You answer the Pitiless Horde, then you have Catacomb Sifter versus a couple Den Protectors. Yes, Caleb's hand is all spells as far as you know, but at least you have the board stabilized.
So on the board, this looks like it could work for Casey. But, I mean, Caleb has spells. Anyway, it's not going to make that play. We're going to go ahead and loot with the Jace. And it's a risky line, but it really did pay off for Caleb. I believe the card he drew was Sidisi's Faithful.
Yeah, that's a huge payoff here, as now he has a line of Catacomb Sifter, Sidisi's Faithful, get the Pitiless Horde off the table.
Yeah, maybe even shrink one of the Den Protectors.
Yeah, this is a great looking turn here.
I think it's going to be that. Catacomb Sifter is the play. It brings a Scion with it. See if he goes through all the motions you just mentioned. Sidisi's Faithful with the last land. It's going to sacrifice itself to take care of the Pitiless Horde. I suppose a 0/4 is not very good at blocking Den Protectors.
No, it's a bit better at at blocking a Shambling Vent, but with Caleb's hand clogged with spells, probably pretty far away before he uses a turn doing that. And a 1/1 is a 1/1, has power.
Scry will be to the bottom. 1 Den Protector will be shrunk, and the turn is passed. So Casey, as it stands, may have stabilized. But a 4th land for Caleb. That's going to activate a lot of things. If he has nothing else Pitless, he can dash a Pitless Horde, though I'm guessing he has stronger plays.
Dashing Pitless Horde is a rough use of a turn here, because Casey can chump block and then untap with adjacent play and all of his mana.
Sure.
Good chance he can really hammer Scherer if all he can do is dash a Pitless Horde this turn. Also means that next turn, Caleb is in much in the same spot. Is he dashing again and saying go, or advancing his board?
We'll see where Scherer wants to go. The fetch is for a Smoldering Marsh. Does have the two basics in play for his battle lands. We'll see where he wants to go. Pitless Horde we know is in his hand. But maybe he has other plans. It looks like the dash is the play.
With Caleb's hand being a little bottlenecked on mana right now, and the fact that he has a Shambling Vent in play, I think I might have even preferred just casting this and passing the turn. I think he just needs to get stuff out of his hand right now.
Now, if he casts it and passes the turn, that does mean that Casey can give flashback to Murderous Cut and kill it if this is his only threat.
Sure. This is just that is true. That's a fair point. This is just a really rough use of mana right now.
Yeah, I imagine on Casey's side, he's very happy to see that this was Caleb's best play. But anyway, the attack will go in. So we have a 2/1 Den Protector. We have Pitless Horde. We have Caleb tapped out. So correct me if I'm wrong, but he's just offering a sacrifice of Den Protector into Catacomb Sifter. Let's see here, maybe different. It looks like a double block for Casey.
Yeah, it looks like Pordes kind of wanted to manage this the other way, which is get this off the table and have Jason play against a couple 2-power creatures, rather than chump block and try to work through the Pitiless Horde that way. If he has no solution in his hand to a dashed Pitiless Horde, maybe this is just the better block for him.
Yeah, so I mean, let's look at what happens then. So Caleb dashes Pitiless Horde to play around Murderous Cut, and I think Casey respects it enough that he actually is willing to trade both parts of Catacomb Sifter to get rid of the 5/3. So in that sense, it seems like mission accomplished for Caleb.
Yeah, he's got to be happy with how combat turned out. I'm still concerned that this is kind of too slow of a path.
I agree.
But if you took that run, you got to be happy with how that turn worked out.
All right, well, Casey's play is to shrink a Den Protector again and to play a Grim Haruspex. Looks like Caleb's draw of Shambling Vent. He's also boarded in Rising Miasma.
We talked about that a little bit. This is not the spot where you want that.
No, not when you're playing multiple Den Protectors. Looks like he has that. I believe he may have another Horde. Interesting if he's going to go for Activative Event or that second Horde. It's going to be another 5/3. Well, Casey's going to have to block that one. Both creatures will swing. Last time the Den Protector swung at Casey, ignoring the Planeswalker. I believe Caleb will make the same play. So Pordes down to 4. Horde will trade with Haruspex. A pass. Now, he's got Pordes to 4. Now, are we concerned at all about how many counters this Jace is getting?
No, there isn't a whole lot to flashback other than the one Murderous Cut, which has kind of been his whole turn for several turns now because he doesn't have second black mana to follow up with Murderous Cut and a black play in the same turn. Also, Murderous Cutting a Den Protector is the same as just plussing the Jace on one of the Den Protectors right now. So.
Sure. And that was the play. Casey still on 4 lands, pluses on a Den Protector. Caleb does have 4 power in play, and it looks like he's going to go for the kill. Activates Shambling Vent. That's 2 power. The other Den Protector is 4. Here's a lethal swing. Does Pordes have an answer? He does. It's a copy of Murderous Cut. Shambling Vent will go down, and Caleb will go to, or Casey either will go to 2.
Still drawing live, though. Collected Company can pull him right back into this.
Next turn, he's going to have to take care of a Den Protector, another Den Protector, and that Shambling Vent. All of them are now lethal that Pordes is at 2. 5th land is the play. Jace is at 8. I do believe Pordes has a copy of Rally in his hand.
And Rally can stabilize this game or come close to it, especially if Caleb gets sloppy here with attacks. I mean, if he just dials up the vent and sends in everything, he might get wiped out.
And Pordes down to 1. We take a peek at Casey's graveyard. He has a Sidisi's Faithful. He has a Grim Haruspex. He has a Catacomb Sifter. He has an Antuco Husk. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, this is going to be a really juicy rally.
And it will be for 3 now that he hit that 4th land. So Catacomb Sifter will come along. For Caleb, look at his hand. He's got some removal. He's got a Silk Wrap, a Murderous Cut. Don't know the last card. Oh, Rising Miasma is the last one.
Yep.
So here's Den Protector. It's swinging for lethal. Casey's going to have to rally up the Ancestors. Does it for 3. It is a Faithful, a Haruspex, and a Sifter, and a Nantuko Husk. They're all in play.
And this is going to be a dead Den Protector, a whole lot of cards. Though it appears, though, Scherer is considering a response.
Yeah, so right now, all the creatures are in play. There's an Exploit trigger on the stack, and there's a Catacomb Sifter trigger that wants to make a 1/1 on the stack. And Caleb says, you don't get to do any of those yet. Hold on, I have responses. I believe we're looking at that Murderous Cut in his hand.
He may want to Murderous Cut the Nantuko Husk and just force Pordes' hand on doing whatever sacrifice for value kind of stuff he wants to do up front.
Right, because if you Murderous Cut the Nantuko Husk, then the rest of the creatures will exile on the upkeep.
Yes. Or they have to decide to, stay in play and block or something along those lines, but...
Looks like he'll go for Murderous Cut, but it's going to be on Grim Haruspex. Well, that was interesting. Now Casey can't reload his hand as easily.
Yeah, it forces an issue in much the same way here.
Haruspex will die. Looks like no card draw there. Casey will just let it die. He'll scry 1, but the scry was to the top. Husk is a 4/4. So now we have a trigger to make a 1/1. We'll resolve that. We have an Exploit trigger on Sidisi's Faithful. I'm not certain he wants to bounce a Den Protector. I suppose he could have the Faithful bounce itself.
Mm-hmm. Or the Catacomb Sifter, or
sure.
Something along those lines.
Kind of interesting decision on this one. So if he wants to sacrifice a creature, he can exploit and bounce something. So it looks like he's going to trigger the Catacomb, targeting the Catacomb Sifter. And he scries 1 off Sidisi's Faithful, dying. And now Catacomb Sifter is going to be returned to his hand. So the 4/4 Husk will block the Den Protector.
But that was not without risk, because if Scherer had a follow-up removal spell right there for the Nantuko Husk, that Den Protector would have just come across the finish line.
Right, the Scion can't block. It's not big enough. And it looks like Caleb will Silk Wrap the Husk. This is an interesting line. Casey will sacrifice the Husk in response. He doesn't wants that guy in the graveyard for another rally.
Though that would have happened regardless.
And now we go back to Casey's turn. He's going to give flashback to that Murderous Cut, delve away some of those fetch lands. And Den Protector is gone. Casey Pordes at 1, but I'm starting to feel like he might have stabilized. Now, of course, Caleb plays Siege Rhino. Things are not all happy here.
Although, looks like Scherer has drawn it and will probably go for it. I think Pordes probably has left Collected Company in his hand because he didn't play the Catacomb Sifter last turn.
You might be right. All right, well, here's the play for lethal. Siege Rhino drawn by Caleb. All right, Casey's at 1. Can it win? If Pordes he's going to play Collected Company, he would need to hit Zulaport Cutthroat and Husk, perhaps?
I don't even know if that does it. Because he has either sacrificed the Cutthroat or the Husk in the second
You're right, he
piece of the iteration.
He can't have all 3.
Yeah. Good time for Siege Rhino.
Your opponent at 1. Yeah, I mean, a great time, especially because we felt like this game had gotten away from Caleb.
Well, it was at least at the point where Pordes had stabilized and with a big draw, looked like he was about to turn around. And he had Collected Company, and he had Jace in play, ready to flash back Collected Company the following turn. So
yeah,
the door was starting to shut there a little bit for sure.
So if Caleb doesn't draw the Rhino, yeah, you're right. Casey companies, then he companies again. I mean, I'm concerned if I'm a Scherer fan now.
Yeah, there might be a couple turn window there for sure to find a Siege Rhino depending on what the Collected Companies yield, but the game was very close to getting flipped around in Pordes' favor, but Siege Rhino able to close it out before Pordes took over.
All right, so we're going to go look at the sideboards again. One of the things that's always great in a best of 5 is kind of the chess match that starts to happen in the sideboards. We saw that in the top 8 with Caleb Scherer boarding out his Snapping Gnarlids, then when he saw Radiant Flames boarding back in some Snapping Gnarlids. All right, so if you're on Casey's side, you have seen a ton of things now. You've seen Duress, I believe. You know about Pitless Horde, multiples. You'd assume they're probably all there. I don't believe he knows about the Rising Miasma yet. Caleb had one, but didn't cast it. Okay, so let's look at Pordes' side first. If you know your opponent's going to try to hit you with these 5/3s, does it change anything?
No, because I think he's still keeping in Grim Horror Specs, the Murderous Cuts, the Merciless Executioners, and then Nantuko Husks, which are his ways of directly answering a card like Pitiless Horde alongside Diseased Faithful, which gives him a lot of breathing space. So I don't think much changes.
So if you assume the cards that Casey has boarded out for these are, it looks like Elvish Visionary is probably one of the ones to go here. Does it change maybe the main deck cards he wants? You know, if he's boarded out some number of horror specs, does he go back in so that they can trade with Pitiless Horde?
Maybe. I'm not really sure exactly how he sideboards for this matchup. I would be loath to get away from something like Elvish Visionary because it seems just so important for building up a critical mass of stuff. Because your graveyard is not a guarantee to be on, I think, you know, maybe you remove 1 or 2 of the rallies, maybe you remove 1 or 2 of the Zulaport Cutthroats and so forth. Get a little bit away from that.
The cards that are just dead when Anafenza's in play?
Right, and Elvish Visionary is your way of finding your critical cards and drawing to your removal spells to get rid of Anafenza. It's not a card I would sideboard out. A lot of people just kind of, I side out the cantrips. I can't think of what to sideboard out here. The cantrips just say draw a card on them, so we'll get rid of it.
Cantered, yeah.
But I think Elvish Visionary is an important piece in this matchup for Pordes.
All right, on Scherer's side, so we have seen Pitiless Horde all 4 in. Some number of Duress, Rising Miasma. Any reason for him to change this? It seems like if he has a plan, he probably will just stick to it. There's nothing unexpected out of Pordes' board plan.
Yeah, the Pitiless Horde, they overperformed that game. We didn't get to see Rising Miasma in action. Was not a player given the way that game played out, but...
Yeah, I mean, we saw Rising Miasma in Caleb's hand, and to be honest, it looked bad that game.
Yeah. The thing I'm scared of the most is just leaving in Duress. There aren't that many spells in Pordes' deck. I guess all of them are really important.
So just a reminder of what is on the line here. Not only is it the Season 4 Championship, the trophy, your name on a token, but it is also a spot next week in our Players' Championship. So both players here are going to try to get to that as they are underway for game number 3. Pordes back on the play now. This time they both kept on 7s. Last game, it was a 6-card hand on Scherer's side versus a 5 on Pordes'. And you mentioned that those 5-card hands can be rough for Rally. With him back on the play and back on 7 cards, I like his chances again.
Yeah. Mana should be a lot smoother, more likely to have the critical mass needed for Rally to be impressive.
You know, and we actually didn't touch on that last round. The mana concerns for Casey did end up catching him. We saw him having to discard a turn 3 Nantuko Husk because Windswept Heath can't find black. We then saw him only be able to cast 1 spell per turn because of limitations there. It did get him.
Your green, blue, black deck trying to cast multiple black spells in the same turn with a double white splash. Have some mana hiccups on a mulligan of 5. I'm not going to be too shocked by that.
You know, it is interesting that you have this 4-color deck with extreme mana requirements and you know, there's no Birds of Paradise or anything in here to tie it together. It's just fetches and battle lands tying everything up.
The lands mostly just work. When you mulligan, you'll often have to choose to take a 1 color off for a little while at least. When you're against an aggressive deck, it matters a lot that your mana is like that. But in matches that are played at a slow place like this one is, it's mostly going to be fine.
A very dangerous moment here for Casey. On turn 3, he did not find a 3rd land. Instead, he double fetched and played Jace Vryn's Prodigy, hoping to maybe loot that into a 3rd land. But Caleb is at the ready. His turn 3 play was a Silk Wrap, taking care of Jace. So we go back to Casey, who he's going to need lands to continue playing. At least he finds 1. Now has Sunken Hollow, so double blue, single black, single green online. Should make most of the deck outside of the card Rally the Ancestors work.
Yep. And we're far away from having to worry about Rally anyway, just because nothing in the graveyards. Game's barely started.
Really important that Casey hit the land that turn. Things that were looking a little dangerous for him.
Yes, absolutely.
His play was Catacomb Sifter. So we're back to Caleb. Caleb was able to Silk Wrap and make Shambling Vent on turn 3. Hadn't made a creature yet. His first creature will be, well, the best one he can get. It's Anafenza the Foremost. Right after Anafenza, Casey draws a copy of Rally. And it looks like the play for the turn will be, why not, a Murderous Cut on Anafenza. That's why he boarded them in.
Although, remember, game 1 we saw Caleb have Anafenza and lose. Game 2, we saw Caleb win, and Anafenza nowhere to be found. So it's an important card, but it does not define the whole matchup.
Swing for 3 is the follow-up. That puts Caleb down to 15. No fourth land for Casey. So we'll go back over to Scherer all the way up to 5 lands. His draw was a copy of Siege Rhino. May just be able to go on the classic beatdown strategy here. I think he has something else in mind. He's going to go ahead and fetch. 2 basics in play means this Canopy Vista will be entering the battlefield untapped. Caleb's mana just about perfect at this point. He has 2 duels, 2 basics, and a Shambling Vent. And it's going to be a fully delved Murderous Cut on the Scion.
Caleb here just trying to pressure. I would imagine the follow-up is going to be Siege Rhino. Pretty aggressive line here. I think his hand just might be lands and another copy of Murderous Cut.
So Scion seems, okay, he's worried about collected company?
Yes.
That is a very aggressive use of the card.
The problem is that Pordes has a lot of draw steps to land number 4 if your concern is collected company.
Sure.
He has a lot of time to find it.
The follow-up was Rhino. On Pordes' side, so he plays a Sidici's Faithful. It will sacrifice itself and bounce Siege Rhino. That's something which, well, never like having a creature getting bounced, but if you're going to have one, it might as well be Siege Rhino. He'll get to scry 1, hidden with Catacomb Sifter, and then play another Jace.
And Pordes left on top of the scry, so next turn is threatening land number 4, is threatening a flashback on Murderous Cut. And with Caleb flooding out here, doesn't have a lot to punish him for unsummoning a Siege Rhino.
Yeah, not at all. Looks like it'll just be Rhino again. So, good news is it's another trade of life points. Caleb up to 18, Pordes down to 11. But he'll have no other plays. He passes the turn. Our draw is a land for Pordes. It is a good one at that. It's a copy of Prairie Stream. So that's his first white source.
And land number 4.
Catacomb Sifter and Jace in play for Casey. 3 cards in the graveyard. So not just yet ready to flip the Jace. And that means he will loot. Draw. Looks like we may have found him another Catacomb Sifter.
Remember that these collected companies post board on top of Sidici's Faithful, which would already be bad news for sure here. Pordes can also find Merciless Executioner in a spot like this.
A show of strength from Casey. That loot, on that loot, he discarded Nantuko Husk. And it looks actually like the loot was not, maybe he found another, it looks like another Murderous Cut. He's gonna cut away Siege Rhino this time. Play an Evolving Wilds and attack for 2. So he has his graveyard is a Murderous Cut, an Nantuko Husk, and a Sidici's Faithful.
Not necessarily a great graveyard for Rally the Ancestors, but an excellent graveyard for Jace, as he has access to another removal spell.
If that Evolving Wilds can find a plains, coupled with the Prairie Stream in hand, it means Rally the Ancestors for 3 is online next turn. And Caleb, it looks like he may be flooding. His play here is land 7, activate Shambling Vent, and attack. That is not a show of strength.
Yeah, the leftovers in hand. You know, you'd assume he'd cast a removal spell if he had it. He would have cast a creature if he had it.
I certainly would kill the Jace if I could.
Right, so what's going on in that hand? Most likely scenario, just a bunch of lands.
Go back over to Casey. Land 5 draws land 6. Now 4 cards in the graveyard means Jace is very close to being active. And we'll start with an attack from Catacomb Sifter. Caleb will go back down to 16. He's been doing a great job of gaining life between the 2 Siege Rhino plays and the Shambling Vent attack. He's got Casey down to 9, but he's run out of resources at the moment. And our backup is a Grim Horror Specs from Casey. No loot just yet off Jace.
Yeah, probably looking to get that free chump block with Jace.
Sure, deny the life gain off Shambling Vent.
Yep. Save yourself 2 points.
And Casey will oblige. Here's an activation of Shambling Vent. It will swing. And yes, we see a block on Jace. A tap. We've seen Caleb kill a Jace before in that situation, but not this time. The loot will happen. Casey discards a copy of Windswept Heath. Jace flips into a Planeswalker. No damage is taken. For Caleb to follow up his Warden of the first tree. And another land, he'll pass. Now, had Caleb not attacked with Shambling Vent there, I do have a line I want to look at here. He could have played Warden and leveled it up twice, meaning next turn he could go for the full 8/8. I know it's all your eggs in one basket.
Well, the problem is that Pordes, he's still got the Murderous Cut in the graveyard and the Jace in play. So that's just,
okay.
You know.
Just asking him to kill it.
I think that if there was no Jace involved or no Murderous Cut, you could roll the dice and hope that that got you somewhere, but not something he could do with Murderous Cut in the graveyard.
Makes sense. We go back over to Pordes. A -3 on Jace targets Murderous Cut. Plan here looks just to be to cut down all of Caleb's creatures. That, so far, so good. Here's a Delve. It'll take care of the Warden. A swing for 5 on Casey's side. And you know, he has a rally in hand, but it's starting to look like he may not even need it.
Well, he still has Nantukas and Sidisi's Faithful there, so he gets to unsummon a blocker if he's feeling it. But yeah, this comes up a lot, honestly. As you see Scherer here scoop it up. The rally deck post board often doesn't need Rally the Ancestors to win. We saw it a lot last week in Denver, and it's pretty common in the post board games where, you know, people are slowing down quite a bit. They're giving you more time to leverage your Grim Horsepex, Jace type of synergies, and you can wear people out without ever having to touch Rally.
Yeah, so strong play, yeah. Caleb does drop Pitless hard on the last turn there, but he does scoop it. So 2 games to 1. Casey Pordes is in the lead. He is 1 more game away from the finals and for his 10th match win here in Standard.
Yeah, sure put a lot of eggs in the Siege Rhino basket there when he went for Murderous Cut on the Scion into Siege Rhino. Pordes was able to manage the Siege Rhino, and Scherer's draw just didn't offer enough else to power through.
So the thought is if Scherer, say, doesn't go with the aggressive line, he would have a Murderous Cut later on for the Jace.
Which may or may not matter, may or may not be good enough. I mean,
right.
by the time Pordes starts drawing out of it and making his land drops, if he's doing things like Collected Company or Grim Horror Specs, your one removal spell to break up something may not amount to very much. So I'm not sure if I agree with Scherer's play, but I understand wanting to take a roll of the dice there and hope that Pordes just doesn't draw out of it because Scherer's hand was not allowing him really to do anything else.
Yeah, and you do see the short shelf life on these kill spells in Caleb's deck. You know, Murderous Cut's a great kill spell, but we do get to these boards where, you know, Casey doesn't ever offer up, I guess, a great target for removal.
Yeah, and you want to be using them early on as tempo plays because it takes Rally a little bit of time to get going, and if you're breaking up the early creatures, you're really forcing them to collect a company into a board and start to get something going. But past a certain point, they aren't really too hubbed on any one particular creature staying in play. The removal spells get a lot worse.
Well, for Caleb Scherer and Casey Pordes, they are 2 of 4 players still left with that last spot at the Players' Championship. We'll take a look at the players qualified right now. Your at-large spots are locked up. So you see here we have our 4 points winners. That is Joe Lissette. Joe Lissette joining them this weekend as he took the overall points lead. We have our 3 invitational winners. We have Brad Nelson. We have our 7 at-large bids, but we're waiting on that 4th invitational winner. Casey Pordes, Caleb Scherer, Vidianto Wajaya, and Christopher Giuliano. One of the 4 of them will be joining us next week in Roanoke. We'll see just who that is.
Yeah, no crazy math, no more if this person does X, Y, and Z sort of scenarios. It's just one of these 4 players win this event. They'll be in Roanoke as the last player next week.
For a while, Joe Lissette was making things look interesting. If he had won, it would have opened up a slew of possibilities. He, however, was dispatched 3-0 in the top 8 by Christopher Giuliano. His reward, though, is that Joe did take the points championship from Jonathan Morawski. Both, however, still will be in there next weekend.
It's invite the same thing. It's another plaque for Lissette, but doesn't change much as it pertains to the Players' Championship.
All right, underway, game number 4. Caleb back on the play, and he'll be a Warden of the first tree on turn 1. And Looks like double Warden was the keep. That kind of aggressive start can be pretty good, I think, here.
It's important for Scherer to get on the board early because later on in the game, his mid-range creature plays that are on the ground do not amount to much, as we've seen in the games where Scherer's lost. The Siege Rhinos, even those past a certain point, just aren't worth a whole lot in combat.
For Pordes, he's got a turn 2 play of his own. Not many things in his deck, actually, that profitably block a 3/3, at least early on.
Yeah, it's the same stuff with the Pitless Horde. You're looking at Grim Horror Specs. Nantukuhas can do a little bit of work there, but he does not block 3 toughness early on in the game that well.
So what he'll actually play, he has 1 card that can block it. He's going to play a Sidisi's Faithful, no exploit. So that's a Kraken Hatchling made here.
0-4s, still good against 3/3s. That has not changed.
Suppose we can go older. Steel Wall if we want to get real old with it.
Steel Wall.
I imagine that card's been good against you from time to time.
Yeah, I've lost to many cards similar to that, yes.
I was always the guy playing the Steel Wall.
Right.
Caleb's going to swing in. One of them will get blocked. The other Warden will get in for a point of damage. And we see the prize, Anafenza, turn 3. Strong curve here by Caleb. Warden, Anafenza.
Great start here, though again, Pordes here post-board. Anafenza is not nearly as bad for him as it is in the first game, where it's very challenging for him to get off the table.
We did see him lose with a great draw game 1. And what seems to be the case in all these post-board games, Anafenza is met by Murderous Cut from Casey. Takes his whole turn and graveyard to do so, but I'm sure he's happy with the trade. And for Caleb, it is an attack once again for 1 and another Anafenza.
But right now, Pordes not doing a whole lot with his graveyard. Still, just a great play on curve and breaks up any synergies that might happen to come up.
Casey's playable Grim Horror Specs and Evolving Wilds. He'll pass.
I wouldn't be surprised if Grim Horror Specs was just on blocking and trading detail.
Sure, that much makes sense. If he even gets to do that, you see a copy of Dromoka's command in Caleb's hand. He may just be able to bring the beatdowns here. Blocking is looking tougher and tougher. His hand low to the ground indeed. Snapping Gnarlid. Dromoka's command. Murderous Cut.
Dromoka's command plus Murderous Cut this turn allows him to clear out the board if he wants it.
We'll see the command. Counter on 1 Warden. And Anafenza will fight the Faithful.
Well, I think that's the much bigger prize to exile, because the small rallies getting back the DC's Faithful,
Sure.
They've been really problematic for sure. Scherer's trying to end this game close, and I don't think he really cares about any card advantage sort of stuff going on.
Yeah, and I suppose with Anafenza in play, it's not like we have to care what order we're killing them.
Exactly.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, double kill spell happened here. Dromoka's command and Murderous Cut taking care of both creatures. And an attack for Caleb. This is huge. Anafenza trigger, sharing the 1/1 counter love. That's going to be 8 points of damage. Casey from 15 down to 7. We may be going toward yet another game 5. Both these players went to 5 in their quarterfinals.
Lethal on the table. Anafenza in play. No graveyard to speak of for Pordes.
Yeah, not much to go off of.
And before you get all hung up on Anafenza's text box here, it looks like just a 3-mana 4/4 backed up by Subordinates was good enough to get this game.
If you get rid of the graveyard ability, I think Anafenza is still an A+ this game.
Right.
Remember, these Wardens both 2/2s. Neither of them have been leveled up yet. Caleb has not hit a 4th land. None of that really seems to matter. Plays for Casey are Jace and Zulaport Cutthroat. He'll pass. Anafenza still in play, so Cutthroat will be no help in life gain. And look at this from Caleb. Silk Wrap, 2 Silk Wraps in hand. So here we go. He will wrap up the Jace. And that is enough for Casey. So turn 5 concession from Pordes. A fast one here for sure. I'm sure he'd love to run that one again. We're headed to 5.
Jump on top of him early, get an Anafenza into play, back it up with a couple of removal spells. Very, very challenging draw for Rally to beat.
Small space. I know there are a lot of these decks, these synergy-based decks, the combo decks, the ramp decks, the format that I know you'll hear players say that, well, I have a good matchup against Obs on aggro, except when they have Warden into Anafenza, sometimes they just race me.
Yes. It's surprising just how much it feels like we're repeating this over and over again, where Obs on aggro, the most important thing in all these mid-range kind of matchups would be a Jeskai Black, 4-color Rally, all the way up to decks like Esper Dragons. The early aggressive starts are so important because with it, you start creating a lot of leverage with your bigger mid-range plays, but without it, your opponent can just respond to cards like Anafenza and Siege Rhino as they come up. You need to be attacking early to really create a lot of power out of your mid-range plays.
Yeah, it is interesting. So we're going to talk about Caleb Scherer here. We mentioned how he's on a 10-match win streak. Well, this is a guy trying to make his way toward the Players' Championship. So from St. Louis, Missouri, we have Caleb Scherer, 27-year-old. He has one Invitational top 8 back in this same one last year. He actually top 8 the Invitational. Also top 8 2 Open Series, both in Legacy. Both this year, he's quite the Storm player.
Came back towards the back end of Season 4 to make it close, get himself into the race for the Players' Championship on points. Fell short in that respect. Can't make it that path now with Joe Lissette being eliminated in the quarterfinals, but he's still in the top 4. Wins this match, and then he's a match away from the Players' Championship. Maybe not the way he drew it up necessarily, but he can still get there.
Now he'll have to win one more against 4-color Rally. He'll be on the draw again. And this has been back and forth between the players. If you look at it, the person on the play is 4-0 in the match.
Speaks a lot to how important the early aggression is.
Yeah.
Play draw is a huge part of this matchup.
So last chance for Caleb, I guess, to break serve. Will players be keeping on their 7s? For Casey, it's a yes. And for sure, it's going to be no. He'll be down to 6.
Yeah, I saw a lot of mid-range plays in that hand and not a whole lot of lands, so it's not going to get it done here.
For those of you joining us right now, this is Game 5 of the semifinals here in the Season 4 Invitational on the SCG Tour. Caleb Scherer versus Casey Pordes, both of them winning in 5 this morning. One will play in the finals. Following the conclusion of this, we will have our second semifinal match. That's between Vidianto Wijaya on Esper Dragons and Christopher Giuliano on the Red-Black Dragons deck. Of those 4 players remaining, one will hoist the trophy this evening and will join us next week at the Players' Championship in Roanoke. Both players, great stories here. For Caleb, he has won his last 10 matches. For Casey, he has won all 9 of his matches in Standard. One of those two is going to have to give, and it's going to happen this game. Caleb has kept on 6, so we're underway. You see Anafenza waiting once again in Caleb's hand. It's one of the more important cards he's had this match.
The size matters, and the text box has also been disruptive.
For Casey, gets his pair of basics out early into a Zulaport Cutthroat. Battlelands will be online. Has not played an Elvish Visionary since Game 1. I'm suspecting that was what went out for his sideboard cards.
I'm starting to agree with you. I'm not sure that's the call I would necessarily make, but I suspect that card's been cut.
Hard to argue with his results, though. Now we'll see how Caleb can keep pace. We go back to his turn. He's going to go ahead and fetch for a basic forest. No Warden of the first tree this game for Caleb. Double Warden into Anafenza was good enough to take down the game for him last time. And this one, it's going to be Snapping Gnarlid. This is the card that's really been unique to Caleb's Obzon build. 4 copies in the main. He has kept them in all sideboarded games. Really seems to believe that aggro is the way to go in this matchup.
A big stumble here from Casey, though.
Yeah, second Zulaport Cutthroat. That part's good, but no third land. And 2 Cutthroats in play are going to have trouble answering an Anafenza, and that is exactly where Caleb's going to go. Fetch land will make Gnarlid a 4/4 on top of it.
Yeah, this is a perfect window here for sure to get this Anafenza into play. Pordes not threatening to Murderous Cut anytime soon. He has a creature to sacrifice to Merciless Executioner. Should that be Pordes' play? The Zulaport Cutthroats don't do anything for the time being. There's a Rhino and a land all ready to go for next turn. If Pordes doesn't draw a land this turn, this game might already be over.
So here's the 4/4 swing from Gnarlid. Casey will go down to 15. Even if he were to block, there would be no drains. Anafenza stopping all the action from Zulaport Cutthroat. See some pep pick up on Caleb's side. The mulligan was difficult, but he senses weakness. The draw is Rally the Ancestors for Casey Pordes. That's no help. He just has to pass.
Worst draw on the deck. Can't cast it. Doesn't do anything even if he could.
And this may just be it. It may be Caleb, our grad student from St. Louis, on his way to the finals. You can tell he knows it too. The fetch is for land number 4. It's a duel. Comes into play untapped.
And Snapping Gnarlid is doing quite a bit of work here compared to Heir of the Wilds.
Yeah, it's been a 4/4 each turn. He's been playing fetch lands right after it. And this is going to be, the tech will scream in for 9 damage. Both are 4/4s. A counter will be on Snapping Gnarlid. And Casey, all his lines here are really tenuous. You know, if he chumps them both, he can Murderous Cut, but that's about it. But wait, not even, they wouldn't even go to the graveyard.
Yeah,
this is...
Anafenza is size and text box is causing Pordes all sorts of trouble on top of the fact that he's missed his 3rd land drop.
So he'll take 4 off Anafenza. He's going to chump the Snapping Gnarlid. Zulaport Cutthroat is exiled.
And I think the leftover here in hand for sure after the Siege Rhino, Dromoka's command, Murderous Cut.
There's just no way.
This is too much.
Yeah, and there you have it. Caleb Scherer comes back. He's the first person to take down Casey Pordes, and he does it at just the right time. 3 games to 2. Scherer is victorious, and he'll be moving on to the finals with Obs on Aggro.
Congratulations to Casey Pordes. A great run through the standard portion of this tournament, a top 4 invitational finish, and handled that game 5 there with class at the end. Just extended the hand. You can tell maybe a little bit frustrated by how the 5th game played out, but handling it gracefully. And Caleb Scherer, again, 1 win away from getting the Players' Championship.